Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, December 6th, 2017. MLS Cup week continues here on Soccer Today. It's day 2, and to talk about Toronto, talk about the city, the sport, and a book coming out next year about TFC, Joshua Kloke of The Athletic TO. How you doing, Joshua?
I'm well. How are you?
We're doing well today here. Obviously, Joshua, things getting closer to the big day on Saturday. We're seeing more and more hype around this game. Just quickly before we get going, you live in the city, you live in Toronto. You've been covering this team all year. Are you seeing much general population, general public excitement for this game from your perspective yet?
Not just yet. My understanding is that, most of the out-of-town media will arrive today, Wednesday, and I think we can maybe expect to see coverage, on some of the major networks ramp up. But yeah, I actually haven't been downtown in the last few days, but I have to imagine there's a bit more signage kind of promoting the event. But it's interesting as well that, you might expect a little bit more, but this is the second year in a row that the city is holding MLS Cup. So I also wonder if this is kind of becoming commonplace now. I wonder if casual fans are just, getting used to the fact that, TFC is now a really, really good franchise, and winning and hosting these kind of games is now kind of expected, right?
Yeah, well, fair enough. I do think for those that have never been to Toronto for a TFC game, it's very almost neighborhoody with the club. You see a lot of signage down in Liberty Village in that area right now, and certainly I spend a lot of time down there, and it's a lot of excitement building in that area of the city at any rate. Joshua, I think the big topic that is on a lot of people's minds from a game perspective this week has to do with Jozy Altidore and his injury. Everything that they say speaks to the idea that, he's going to run through walls, he's going to be out there, he's a warrior, all that sort of stuff, he's going to play. How much of that do you think is them trying to sort of hide what the actual injury is, maybe play some mind games? You see this in other sports. Is it a bit of that going on, or do you think that they're just being sincere and that there's absolutely not going to be an issue here on Saturday?
I don't think there's not going to be an issue. I think Jozy did a teleconference yesterday with a bunch of out-of-town media, and we spoke to Greg about Jozy, and it's clear that the ankle is not at 100%. Jozy kind of said as much. He kind of just alluded to the fact that while it won't be 100%, it'll be playable. I think the injury it might actually be more serious than they've kind of let on. I don't have any intel. That's just me watching Jozy and the fact that Jozy didn't start training yesterday. He came on right at the end. By all accounts, he looked okay. Didn't look great. But yeah, listen, Jozy, like the rest of TFC, anybody that played in that final last year, there's no way they're keeping Jozy out of the game. And you have to ask how, is a Jozy at 65, 70% better than a St. Ricketts at 100%? I think that number alone suggests to me that maybe Jozy might not go the entire game. He'll probably go as long as he can. Maybe he does hit that 65, 70-minute mark. And if TFC do have a lead, then you bring on some fresh legs and Ricketts. But yeah, I don't think there's any posturing here to keep anybody at bay. I think the injury is quite serious, but with one game left, there's no way you're going to keep Altidore out of the lineup.
When we look at the season as a whole, Joshua, we do have a sentiment of, wow, TFC has come a long way, records and wins, but there still seems to be a feeling of we didn't achieve anything yet. The next game will decide if we achieve anything. Now, that being said, is the onus of the win, of the match itself, on Toronto this year? Last year, it was a new experience for the team, for the city, for the club, for the majority of the players too. This year, it's kind of now or never. Do you think that Toronto needs to put a performance for the ages on Saturday to get a result, or the result speaks for itself? Is the way the result is going to be achieved important?
No, I don't think the way the result is achieved. I don't think they need to play beautiful football to get the win here, because if you look at their 4 playoff games, short of maybe that first half in the first game against the Red Bulls, they haven't really played beautiful football at all through these 4 games. The script has kind of been flipped, and Seattle came into last year's final playing a really kind of grinding defensive style, and we saw that in the fact that they didn't register a shot. And TFC have very much taken on that approach. They have this ability to just wear teams down. And I think at the end of the day, I hate to use a phrase like this, but just win, baby. Like, it doesn't matter how it's done. Having Seattle come in to TFC's stadium and win 2 years in a row, that's something that is really, really going to hurt the team. So I don't expect TFC to come out and play that kind of wide open football that they did throughout the summer, where they were just decimating teams 4-0 at will. I think it'll be very, very cagey, and I wouldn't be surprised, for another 1-0 game, because TFC they know that Seattle can score. Seattle leads MLS in scoring through the playoffs so far. They know they can score, so they don't want to open up too much either. So I expect a really cagey first half, and I don't expect it to look, all that attractive at all.
One player for Toronto that's been in the conversation lately, but not just for his play, for a lot of reasons, is Michael Bradley. The fact that he has no player votes for MVP, or the fact that he's been booed by American fans because of the United States men's national team lack of qualification for the World Cup, or players mentioning that they're not necessarily his favorite player. How important is this game for Michael Bradley? I don't like to use the L word, which is legacy, by the way, but this game could be important of how we view Michael Bradley down the road. What is your thought on Michael Bradley's last few months?
Yeah, I actually like to use that L word a lot, legacy, when talking about Michael Bradley, because he's never won, a championship in the various teams that he's played for. And he's played for, in some of the biggest leagues in the world. And as much as it's not something you really need to discuss with him and Josie right now, the U.S. not qualifying for the World Cup wears on a player like him, especially considering he wears the armband. So does he want to go down as the player that didn't captain the U.S. national team to a World Cup and then lost 2 finals in the row as captain? I don't think so. And I think that's why you're seeing Michael Bradley play some of the most, determined football of his life through these playoffs. I was in Columbus for that first leg, and Bradley looked like a man possessed. He had to take that entire team on his back without, Javinko and Altidore, and it's really incredible to watch. You get the sense that this final means a lot to Bradley, because he's invested so much time and he's invested so much emotion in this club, this city. I mean, you guys know as well as anybody else, you go back to 2014 and you have to wonder when he signs here and at the end of the season, if he stops and says, geez, what did I get myself into here? This club is going to need a lot of work. And he's been there every step of the way as this club has kind of gone from, maybes to definitelys. And I think that matters to him, because I know that while he's not, at the end of his career, he's on the other side of 30 and we don't know exactly how many years he has left, and he wants to, players want to be defined by winning. And while, Michael Bradley has won, international tournaments with the American team, I think this, like we said, this not qualifying for the World Cup, I think is something that is a real blemish on your resume. And I know that, Michael doesn't want that to be the kind of defining part of his legacy going forward.
Yeah, the Michael Bradley hate, I don't get. It's a little over the top and not maybe a little misguided, but I guess when you miss the World Cup, when you're used to going there, you vent in whatever way you can. Just continue on the Bradley conversation a little bit. He talks a lot about how much he's fallen in love with the city, Toronto. Now, part of that can be an athlete trying to say the right things. But my take on it anyway is it seems sincere, that it seems like this might be a place that they legitimately consider home. From your working with Michael Bradley, seeing him up close, how sincere do you think he is with those statements? Does he really think of himself as a Torontonian now and be motivated by those kind of feelings?
There's been just whispers and nothing more than whispers in and around some of the media members that Michael is already considering, moving on to a coaching position with TFC when his career is done, because he loves the city like that as much. I believe it's genuine, and I believe that because he's not the only person that has signed with TFC to say that. Greg Vanney, another American, just, he'll gush when he talks about Toronto. And I think, in my own experience traveling to various cities in the United States, Toronto can be a real breath of fresh air for American players that grew up playing in America. I think, if you are into the kind of things that Toronto can offer in terms of culture, in terms of accessibility, in terms of education, I think that matters a lot to people. And I know that, Michael is a father, and he, like any father, wants the best for his children. And I think he feels very comfortable here. And I think anytime you get invested, in a project like TFC has been over the past few years, and I think anytime you get the support that you have from fans, it's going to, you're going to buy in. And emotionally, that's not something you can turn away from very easily. I mean, he clearly feels embraced by the entire city here, and as well he should. I mean, for me, it's either Michael Bradley or Victor Vasquez is this, the MVP of TFC this season. So I really think that it's genuine, and I don't think it's lip service when he says that he wants to finish his career here. I really think we can expect to see Michael Bradley here for a very, very long time. And then just to add, TFC has really established that culture of winning, and they want that to be part of their DNA. And I think Michael Bradley wants to continue that, perhaps in a coaching role. I don't know, but I really wouldn't be surprised for him to stay here for a very long time.
We've got this far in the interview without talking about with Sebastian Jabenko, which just seems strange. And in fact, we didn't ask about him yesterday in our interview either. So he's a bit of an enigma in the playoffs over his 3 years. Hasn't really performed other than that New York game with the hat trick to the level that we were used to in the regular season. Now, part of that could have been injuries last year. I don't think he was 100% for the final. But just sort of what's that about, and how motivated do you think a player that's hard to get a handle on in this way is to sort of make amends for what was kind of an invisible performance in the MLS Cup last year?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. Seba can be hard to kind of get a read on, in part because, when he does do interviews, they're often quite short, and, he's certainly trying to improve his English, and his English has improved throughout the season, but he's often not able to express himself as I'm sure he would, like to. I think that the final last season, everybody can admit, was not Seba's best performance, and subbing him out was, at the time, I remember hearing gasps in the press box because, last season the team was very much defined by Seba. So to sub him out late in the game was kind of a shocker, right? If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he was subbed out in extra time. So, it was a risky move. And I think, if anything, Seba's another guy that, is probably thinking a little bit about his legacy right now. And winning does a lot for players, not just for their own kind of satisfaction, but it does a lot for themselves as a brand and as a commodity. And then that's not to suggest that, Seba wants to win to improve his brand, but it helps, and it helps how you're viewed. And I think he knows that he didn't put in, or he didn't have his best performance in that last Cup final. So to me, that's what's probably driving him is, the thought that I know I didn't have my best showing, and I don't want to be remembered by that. Seba didn't look too effective in the second leg against Columbus. And, he had 23 days off. That's a long, long time for a player that, we've seen to be playing his best when he has, multiple games after one another. So I think it takes Seb a little bit of time to kind of get his groove back. And I fully expect him to be, the player that he can be against Seattle, because, he was signed to be a game changer. And, this is the time where you need him to do just that.
Well, the regular season is one thing in Major League Soccer. The playoffs are another, and usually MLS Cup, it's even more intense than the playoffs. Yes, Giovinco has struggled in his quote-unquote playoff career. How much of it is on Giovinco and Joshua? How much of it is on just the other team putting all men's possible, all hands on deck on Seba?
The funny thing about, players kind of paying extra attention to Seba and defending him a little more closely is that this season especially, he's figured out how to beat that, and that, perhaps because of his height, and perhaps, even more so because he's so quick with the ball at his feet, teams often have no choice but to foul him. And when he gets close to the net, look, we saw what he could do this year. 5 free kick goals. 3 of them, to me, could be counted as, MLS goals of the year. These are just absolute stunners. So then what happens, teams then have to say, look, we have to be a little more cautious when defending him, because we know that if we do foul him, it might be as good as a goal here, right? So I don't expect, I think Seattle is a very well-coached team, and I don't expect them to, foul him at all, because again, they know that this could very well be a 1-0 game, and one Seba free kick could make the difference. So I think a lot of it is on him. I don't expect Seattle to defend him that physically. So yeah, again, this is on him, and he knows that. He knows that what he's capable of doing. It's just whether or not he can do it on that one given day.
When we're looking, you were talking about earlier the culture, Toronto as a soccer club, and the winning culture and everything. It's fascinating to me how it's hard even to say this as a Montreal person, but it's quite impressive what Toronto has been able to do from the bottom to where they are now. Yes, they started from the bottom. Now they're there, but it's how it happened. It's the progress, the process of, let's put money. All right, we didn't put the money at the right place. Defoe was not the answer. Neither was Winter. Neither was Nelson. But let's continue. Let's find ways to get the advantage of us having a lot of money work. How important is the trial and error aspect of Toronto FC in the last decade to finally find a way to make it work? I know you're probably going to talk in your book next year how this Toronto FC squad has evolved over the last 5 years. But what is your thought on Toronto's last decade?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually speaking to Tim Bezbachenko about this yesterday, and his ability to fight the urge to not blow things up after 2014 and even 2015 when they really crashed out of the playoffs. I think what's been important for them, for TFC, is to really, in terms of building a culture, is the belief that it doesn't just end on the field. And you can have, a great starting 11, but you also have to surround that club, or that squad with the right people to kind of optimize their performance. And I'm talking about sports science. I'm talking about cognitive development and creating an atmosphere where players feel, not just welcomed, but they feel supported and they feel like this is where they are supposed to be. And that's kind of coming back to what we were talking about with Bradley. So that's been a really interesting part of their kind of rebirth, or not even rebirth, but just their emergence as, as a club that can set the standard for MLS. They know that, and I think that's a mistake that a lot of TFC teams made early on. Well, we'll get this player, and that will kind of catapult us to, I don't know, where we need to be. And that wasn't always the case because the academy wasn't set up. And behind the scenes, you had 2 or 3 people doing the jobs of, 10 or 12 people. When you go into TFC's training ground right now, you look up to the left and you see those 3 trophy cabinets, one for CONCACAF Champions League, one for MLS Cup, one for the Canadian Championship. Just one is filled. And I think what that does is it just reminds every single person, I'm talking from the PR staff to the cafeteria staff, what you are striving for. You're not just here to come in, collect your paycheck and go home, and establishing that culture where winning is expected is not an easy thing to do. TFC have done it in a really short time, and kudos to them, because they've figured out that it doesn't just, you don't have to just be defined by the players that you have on the pitch. And I think the Defoe signing kind of spoke to that, because they made a splash. They made arguably the biggest splash, or perhaps second to Beckham, in MLS history. Didn't work out. You go back to the drawing board and say, one player isn't the answer. Surrounding players with the right people to optimize their performance, that's how you build a winner.
Joshua Kloke of The Athletic Toronto. Joshua, I just want to take a second. Can you explain to us a bit about The Athletic? It's a new endeavor this year in a lot of different cities, and I have to say, for sports fanatics like we are, and The Athletic, it's a new business model as well, with subscription model. Can you give us a few words on The Athletic?
Yeah, so The Athletic started in Chicago in 2016, and then came to Toronto. Toronto was the second market. And it's a sports website that employs incredible writers, and it's a subscription-based site. You pay quite a small monthly or yearly fee. And what you get in return is a website with accredited writers across the board, delivering ad-free content. And what The Athletic has done really well is try to hit different types of fans. I mean, at The Athletic TO, we have great analysts that just look at the numbers behind, different sports. And we have people that can do features, and we have people that do Q&As, and we try to hit every sport as well. I've been on TFC the entire summer before I returned to the Leafs. And what people are finding, I think what our readers are finding, is that, as we see layoffs across the board in sports journalism, there's still a market for intelligent content. And, and I'm not just talking, top 5 reasons that. What we try to do is really appeal to our readers' intelligence side, and provide the kind of content where you can log on to The Athletic every day and learn something. That's kind of how I approach, every day with TFC is how can I get my readers learning about something that they didn't know about TFC previously. So that's kind of the MO of The Athletic, and we're in a number of cities across North America. And to me, it's been incredibly invigorating to work for a publication that allows you to go in depth on something. I filed about 2,500 words on TFC's Academy earlier this year. And, you don't get that kind of freedom at a lot of other publications, and our readers responded. They want to know this kind of stuff, and hopefully we can be the place where, they learn about the clubs they love.
Joshua Kloke, thank you very much for your time today, and have a great MLS Cup week.
Anytime, boys. Thanks.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we are back on Soccer Today, MLS Cup Week. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, let's continue a bit that discussion on Michael Bradley. It's kind of fascinating. It can go a lot of different places, but Michael Bradley as a person, he's pretty much been asked very tough questions over the last few weeks, and his answers always been more, I don't want to say angry, because it's not the emotion that he has, but he's focused, he's concentrated, he's got a point to prove.
Michael Bradley has an edge to him.
Michael Bradley has a very big chip on his shoulder.
Well, and look, they're humans, right? So that booing, they may not, it may not affect their performance on the day, but it does affect them as humans, I think, and all that sort of hate.
Well,
And
the psyche of it, right? Oh,
yeah.
really? You're gonna boo me? Well, wait till I show you this.
And look, this idea that he wasn't trying in Trinidad and Tobago is absurd.
Of course, like he doesn't want to go play the World Cup, Dwayne. He wanted the summer off, so he didn't play. Correct, right? It's sometimes it. Well,
Look,
yeah,
I
like
need an
they're not
analogy.
trying. Like they're not trying. Anyways, that's hilarious.
I go back to this, and I know that this will probably irritate some Americans that listen to the show out there. But the analogy that I made a week or so ago, comparing the Italians not qualifying, the reaction to that to like a middle-aged person that's maybe done something wrong and has been put in the doghouse, and is reflecting upon that and trying to figure out the ways to improve, whereas the U.S. sort of reacting like an adolescent would in terms of just lashing out and being angry at everything. I think that's apt, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm sort of reflecting where those respective, soccer, football cultures are within those respective countries, right? Like it is still a relatively young situation for the U.S. to be considered in the top, and they would say top countries in the world in terms of the sport. I think the rest of the world would say, somewhere around the top 30 countries in the world. But it's a new situation, right? I mean, it hasn't been that long, really, since they weren't ever qualifying to World Cups. I can remember it. I'm old enough to remember it, and you can make all the old jokes you want, but the point is, it's still an emerging sort of sport in the U.S. And this reaction to Bradley has been just, to me, it's puzzling to me, like why there's this much hate for a player that has done nothing but accept call-ups throughout his career and represent the country and win and score in Mexico City and be a captain and a warrior for the national team. For them to turn this quick, it's I'd be irritated if I was Michael Bradley, but to turn it back to the Toronto situation, in many ways, this is the perfect sort of medicine for him, right? This has got to be a devastating situation for all the players that are involved in that. And now he has this opportunity in front of him to just shut up and get down with it and do the things needed.
You know what's hilarious for me? It's like it's a perfect situation because he's not playing in the U.S. and he's not playing for an American team and he's not wearing the USA jersey. So he's going to have, it's too bad they changed the jerseys and not the country flag on the jerseys anymore. And you don't have the Canadian flag on the shoulders. But it would have been kind of hilarious to see Michael Bradley win a trophy if he wins one this weekend with the Canadian flag on the shoulders.
Well, yeah, and that plays a role in it too. And it's let's not kid ourselves. I think with like the fans have really come around here in Toronto to Michael Bradley, and I understand some of the frustration that people have with him in terms of not with him so much, but how he's put out and put in front of everything, and that's just who his personality is, right? Go ahead.
That's because he's himself. He's genuine. He doesn't try to play a personality for the microphone or for the cameras, and he's just he says what he thinks, and sometimes that can be perceived as arrogant, so it can be perceived as a certain negative way because he's always saying what he thinks. He's not necessarily saying what I want to hear. But in life, you shouldn't be hearing what you want. You should be hearing what you need. And sometimes when you're being told what you need to hear, kind of hurts. So I think that's a little bit where it comes from is, sometimes being faced with reality and somebody telling you things black and white kind of hurts. And that's the feeling I have of Michael Bradley is it's hard to embrace, or it's hard to accept that someone's just normal. Someone's just a normal human being. And he does have things that he likes and he does have things that he doesn't like, and Michael Bradley is close to his opinion and he's open about opinion. So sometimes if you have a divergence of opinion with Michael Bradley, you put him, I don't like the way he thinks, so I don't like him as a player, and I'm gonna find every reason I can to either be against him or find ways in his game that to diminish him or something. But I do feel that there is something outside of Michael Bradley's game, like if the fact that there's something to what Joshua was mentioning. The fact that he never really won anything with teams that he's been playing for. It might not mean anything else, and it's not really something that people are going to talk about when looking at Bradley's career, but it's something that he will know looking, on his Wikipedia page on the top right, when you have all the accomplishment and the trophies, he doesn't want to see a zero there.
Yeah, well, it will have some Canadian championships.
Oh yeah,
Stuff like
there'll be 2 Voyagers Cup, but that's not necessarily what he wants.
Yeah, no, it's not. And the supporter shield will be listed there too. And I find this remarkable. And I ear to ground stuff. Like I've been walking around the city a little bit in the last few days, just listening to conversations. Whenever I hear TFC, my ears perk up, and it's remarkable. Anyone who is out there who's like a supporter shield truther, you really need to listen to people that aren't in the bubble because no one cares about it. And this
No one knows. Never mind cares. They don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice little day for the supporters and the people that are hardcore. But other than that, like even people that go to the stadium regularly view it as the President's Trophy. Is how they view it. It's like,
You took the words out of my mouth when I was going to say, who won the President's Trophy in the NHL last year?
I can tell you who won the
I don't know.
President's Trophy
Okay,
the last 2 years.
that's because it's your team. It's because it's the
Yeah.
damn Capitals who got eliminated in the playoff, like always. But
I heard that exact analogy on the Fan 590 the other night. They said if TFC loses, they become the Washington Capitals. And that
Ouch.
was an analogy that was used.
But you're missing one thing, and that's a big, glorious mustache. I know McPhee works for the Vegas Golden Knights, but can't be the Washington Capitals without a mustache.
Rod Langway and Dennis Marouk. There's been a lot of great mustaches in Washington Capitals history, but
Or great haircuts like Ala Yafredi. That was so beautiful.
Yeah,
The skullet. Oh, a skullet. That's beautiful.
L.A. Afraidy's got that rare double play for me. He played for the Belleville Bulls too.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
And he played for the Sharks too in like 1992. That was awesome.
there you go. Sorry, let's get back to Bradley. though.
But the analogy, that's true though. So is that on the line this Saturday? The fact not
Look,
to become not to become Brett Favre and lose the big one, or not to become the Buffalo Bills of MLS.
you have to lose 2 more in a row after this to become the Buffalo Bills. But
I know.
yeah,
So is Michael Bradley Jim Kelly?
I suppose that would be the analogy people will be using. Look, I think that it's a little different to be serious about that question for now. It will be perceived as a little different amongst the soccer community than it would be amongst the general sporting community. And the soccer community will put more value in the regular season success than the general sporting community will. They'll still not view them as champions, and they'll still view the season as a failure in the end if they don't win on Saturday, which is a bit absurd to me. But those in those in the bubble will say we'll hang on to that shield and we'll say let's just keep building on this, and they're going to be playing the CCL in 3 months time, right? So there's other competitions to look forward to almost immediately. That, however, will be a massive disappointment. Will he become, I just don't think it's comparable in the sense that I do think that the players do care a little bit more about continued success, and what they did in the season was remarkable to get 69 points and to play as well as they did. It just will mean that if they do fail to get the win on Saturday, there's going to be a lot of pressure hanging over them over the entire offseason. And when you talk about the general sporting public, it's the difference between a team that could take the city by storm in the sense. I mean, it's never going to surpass the Leafs or the Raptors or the Jays, but could really become a truly incorporated part of the Toronto sports landscape with a championship on Saturday to versus those general sports fans, your puckheads out there that will just be dismissive of it again. They'll be like, they'll tune in Saturday for one last chance. But if they lose on Saturday, it's going to be harder to get them than ever before because they're going to view them as quote unquote chokers, which is something that I take issue with because there's even any sports, because there's a lot of luck that happens in playoffs. There's shorter samples. Things can happen. I take, not to get on the Capitals for a second, but I do actually take a little bit of pride as a lifelong fan of that franchise to see them be as successful 2 years in a row in the regular season as they have been. And then I get frustrated when people call them whatever, because, the reason the Capitals haven't won the Stanley Cup has nothing to do with their psychological makeup. It has to do with the fact that the Pittsburgh Penguins are friggin' good, and they've had 2 world-class players in their way during the Caps' 2 peaks at the top, right?
And they had a goalie.
And
they had a goalie when the Capitals had none.
Exactly. It's silly when if you'd view it just in black and white ways. Anyway, back to the TFC though. And Bradley, look. Final thought on Bradley before we probably should take a break and talk a little Champions League, I guess, before we have to show up City Place today, apparently.
Yeah.
You remember LeBron in the block? We all remember LeBron.
That block, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. that was an iconic moment because it happened in a deciding game. But if TFC goes on to win the MLS Cup in a much lower scale, obviously, I'm not delusional to compare, MLS and the NBA or Michael Bradley and LeBron James. They're on different planets, but that tackle, I think will be something TFC fans will remember in the same way.
It's similar. You have a superstar player not like tracking back in the defense and a last-ditch effort to stop the play, and on both cases it worked. It's similar play, in truth.
Yeah, it's the effort level to it, and that's like you've got a superstar.
Yeah, running full clip. Both were running full clip.
Yeah, and obviously it's not a perfect analogy because Bradley is more of a defensive player than LeBron is, clearly, but LeBron's an offensive juggernaut. But in the same way, I just view it that way as a TFC guy to see that. That's if TFC wins the MLS Cup and it's not one off like of some crazy 30-yard Javinko free kick or something, the enduring image I will have in my mind of the championship season will be that play, because that to me will be the moment that they would have won the MLS Cup, regardless of how they win on Saturday. You know what I mean? Because without that tackle, which at the time a 2-on-1 like that is a goal 99 times out of 100, and somehow he stopped that. And that is, it's almost that play that gives me the most confidence heading into this game on Saturday. Yeah, objectively, Seattle looks like they're on better form than TFC right now, but there's just something about the Toronto team all year, and even in the way that they've sort of just been gutting it through to get it done in the playoffs, that gives me, I guess, hope is the way to put it. All right.
Let's take a very quick break, Duane. When we come back, we'll glance very, very rapidly on yesterday's result. There's one result in particular that is fascinating to me.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we are back. Duane, you know what was fun for me to watch? Wasn't just that game. It was how Thomas Muller felt after the game and how he talked to the cameras after this surprising result at Allianz Arena. Bayern Munich 3, PSG 1. Duane.
Apologize once again. You got to get the mute button off, Duane. I said, I watched a bit of all the games yesterday, and that one was on sort of the side view. And every time I'd looked up, Bayern seemed to be putting on a bit of a message. Now, they still finished second in the group because the goal diff was just too great to overcome in the end. But nonetheless, it was. I called it a potential marker yesterday, and I think
that's how it felt. That's what it felt. And Thomas Muller's response after the game is like, everybody. Okay, I'm paraphrasing because I don't speak German, and it's what it was scrolling in the bottom, so it was saying, "Look, why are you guys still talking about PSG? We just played them. We beat them. No team looked better than the other one today. Yeah, PSG had a few chances, but we scored 3 goals. We are Munich. We are Bayern Munich, and we can beat anyone at home." And I was like, yeah, that does feel like a marker. That does feel like a guy who's been probably sick and tired of hearing about PSG and how beautiful they're playing and how it's so impressive, and Neymar and Cavani and all the stars. Damn it, we're Bayern Munich, and we can be good too.
No, precisely. It's a bit rich, the clubs like Bayern Munich playing like woe is me, look at PSG and look at all these nouveau rich clubs getting attention because, they've been rich forever.
Jealous.
But however, and these the memes out there where they're like putting the money, like we're burning money, blah blah blah. Yeah, Bayern Munich players don't play for free, guys, and they don't buy players. Bayern Munich is famous in Germany for basically raiding the youth academies of every other team in Germany. So
basically taking
relax here, folks.
Bayern Munich is using the Bundesliga as a whole as its academy. That's what Bayern Munich is doing.
So let's not play moral high ground in terms of financial doping. However, for sure, this is a proud club, though, that believes it should be competing to win the Champions League every year. And they're sort of being everyone. It was interesting, Terry Dunfield's answer to this question, in the sense that he doesn't view PSG as a favorite. And maybe we saw a little bit of that the other day. not a lot of others. I guess the other surprising result, I was watching mostly the Chelsea game, to be honest, because I do have a soft spot for Atleti, so I guess I was watching the Atleti game.
Fine. It's a draw. I'll take the draw.
Yeah, unfortunate for them to finish second, but as we've talked before, it means they're going to avoid a couple big clubs in that next round. So in some ways, finishing second might be the better part of the draw. They might also get Barcelona, though. In fact, it's basically we'll see what the rest of the groups stack out. But there's a good chance they're going to end up with Barca or I can tell you right now, it'll be one of Barca, Besiktas, or depending on what the Liverpool group shakes out, you could get Sevilla in there as well. But that's what you're going to end up with. So
the draw's Friday, right? The draw's always the
Monday.
Monday. So next Monday we'll talk about it more and all the ramifications of MLS Cup. But yeah, Duane. So MLS Cup, it's day 2 of our MLS Cup week. We're back tomorrow with more guests, more familiar voices in the next few days. And later today, Duane, I have the raw audio of yesterday's teleconference with the 2 coaches, Brian Schmetzer and Greg Vanny, and I need to do some editing. But by the end of today, I should be able to put the audio on the network.
And I will be at training tomorrow and Friday. I'll drag my butt up there to get some audio for you for that too, and we'll hopefully get that on the network as well as a little bit of extra content. Kevin and I, there's big news in the Olympic world, so we're going to take a few minutes here, and then we're going to reset, and we're going to come back and do a live 5 Rings sort of special edition to talk about Russia being banned from the Olympics. So if you're an Olympic fan and 5 Rings listener, you can look forward to that probably 11 o'clock, say, Kevin, that work?
11:20 probably, but yes. We'll 11:15. We'll see what we can do, but in the next few minutes. And as always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow with more Soccer Today. It's MLS Cup Week. And as always, thanks, Joshua, for your time today. And have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.